Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. My name is Bob Ackerman, and I am the Dean of Wayne State University Law School, and will be acting as MC for today's ceremony as we celebrate the grand opening of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. At this time, I would ask that everyone stand as Emery Stevens, Assistant Professor of Voice, leads us in the National Anthem and the Black National Anthem. Professor Stevens.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stevens, for getting us on our feet, literally and figuratively. It is my pleasure to introduce to you a number of dignitaries who are with us today. Members of the federal judiciary, members of the Michigan judiciary led by Justice Marilyn Kelly, family and friends of the Honorable Damon J. Keith, who must number in the hundreds of the thousands. Okay. Justice Keith's law clerks, who've come from many miles, people who've been associated with him over the years. State and local government officials, state bar officials, the Honorable Hanson Clark, my congressman, Saul Green, a longtime friend of the Keith Center and longtime public servant, Tiger Great Willie Horton, members of the President's Cabinet and deans of the schools and colleges of Wayne State University, members of the Wayne Law Board of Visitors and Law Alumni Association Board, Wayne State students, faculty, employees, and alumni, and supporters of Wayne Law, Wayne State University, and the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. Thank you all for coming. Today is a significant moment in the history of Wayne Law as we celebrate the official opening of a building that is the tangible representation of one man's lifetime of work of defending the Constitution and promoting equal justice for all Americans. The Honorable Damon J. Keith is one of this nation's leading jurists, an icon of the civil rights movement, and one of Wayne Law's most distinguished alumni. We are so proud to call him our own and to have the privilege of housing the center that will ensure that his legacy and vital work continue well on into the future. Though we ceremoniously cut a ribbon to open this handsome building today, we actually began Keith Center initiatives more than 2 years ago with an ambitious range of exciting and thought-provoking events, symposia, and presentations by prominent civil rights leaders. I am pleased to say that Wayne Law is emerging as the leading public interest law school in the Midwest. Our clinics, now located in renovated facilities adjacent to the Keith Center, continue their mission of providing unparalleled experience to our students while offering legal services to Michigan residents who couldn't otherwise afford them. Our students are distinguishing themselves by their altruism and dedication to community service, evidenced by the 313 Project, our first Skadden Fellow, our first Steiger Fellow, and our first Equal Justice Works Fellow during this past year, and the exemplary work of other student organizations. Our public interest law fellowships and student voluntary pro bono programs provide additional opportunities for our students to provide legal services to underserved populations and to the community at large. Now, with this building completed, we will be able to advance Judge Keith's life mission of promoting justice under the law, using the center and its works to be a focal point for civil rights education and progress in our community and beyond. But as we all know, constructing a civil rights center of bricks and mortar requires more than just idealism and passion. It requires funding. To be precise, $5.7 million in funding. I am pleased to report that funding for this building is complete, that we have completed construction without a dollar of government funds and without spending a dollar and without spending a dollar of our students' tuition. We have funded this handsome, useful building entirely through the generosity of our friends, confirmation of the high regard that people have for Judge Keith, affirmation of our mission, confidence in our ability to execute it, and proof that the spirit of philanthropy is alive and well in this community. I am honored and privileged to thank some generous visionaries who have helped make this center a reality. An important friend to Judge Keith and Wayne Law, Mr. A. Alfred Taubman is a transformative leader and philanthropist. His involvement added energy and meaning to the Damon J. Keith Center. Thank you, Mr. Taubman, for your generous commitment and leadership. We are also privileged to have the support of the Ford family. I would like to thank Cynthia and Edsel Ford for their generous gifts. Please. In conjunction with the Edsel B. Ford II Fund and the Henry Ford II Fund, they helped to make this dream a reality. Additionally, we have received very generous support from the Ford Motor Company Fund. We appreciate the investment in the civil rights efforts at Wayne Law by Marjorie Fisher and the Max M. and Marjorie Fisher Foundation and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Several additional supporters whose leadership gifts were very important to this project, in particular, Comerica Bank, CompuWare Corporation, Eugene and Elaine C. Dreiker, General Motors, the J.P. Morgan Chase Foundation, and the Irwin C. and Isabel Ziegelman Foundation. And let's not forget the hundreds of others, many of whom have joined us today, whose contributions have helped put us over the top. This building could not have been completed but for the efforts on the ground of many others. The law school's faculty building committee, chaired by Professor John Moak. Wayne State's facilities planning and management team, headed up by Jim Sears. Ekta Kamalia was with us every step of the way on this, and Fran Ahern. The architects, people who've designed what I think you will find is a really handsome building, from the SHW group. Jim Chattis, Mike Radonovich, and their design team. Our general contractor, Roncelli Inc., Angelina Sacco, again, somebody who is here most every day, and Fred Van Dam as well. And having grown up in the construction industry, I have to thank the many others whose labors produced this landmark building. We had hoped, of course, to have this ceremony right outside the Keith Center. In fact, I was hoping to get an injunction from a federal judge regarding the weather, but nature has its own way of doing things. I now have the pleasure to introduce the chair of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, Tina Abbott, who will come to the lectern. Governor Abbott.
I can remember it's good morning. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, I would like to welcome you to the grand opening of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. Judge Keith has a long and distinguished career, dedicated at all times to the principles of equal justice under the law. He has been a tremendous advocate for this university and a deep and unwavering friend. Because of this wonderful building, Judge Keith's work will live on the hearts and the minds of all of us, and even the community that he has served so well will never, ever forget. Joining us today from the Wayne State Board of Governors, I'd like to introduce Governors Eugene Dreiker, Governor Paul Massaran, Governor Gary Pollard, and Governor Debbie Dingell, who is somewhere out there. You know, you learn at an early age to be short, brief, but to the point. And the point is, thank you again for joining us on this day of celebration for a great man with a great idea, which is civil rights and justice for all, Damon J. Keith. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Abbott. While the law school renews and transforms itself with this new building, I would like to introduce our campus renewer and transformer, the 11th president of Wayne State University, Alan Gilmore.
Thank you, Bob, and good morning, everyone. Our video difficulties remind me of listening to the car radio some years ago. I was driving to the airport, and one reporter said to another, "Do you know the difference between high-tech and low-tech?" And the answer was no. Answer, low-tech works. We are here today to celebrate the grand opening of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. This is a momentous day for Wayne State University and for Wayne Law, because today we honor the life and work of the Honorable Damon J. Keith, whose commitment to social justice is rooted in his experience and evident in his actions. Judge Keith is a giant in the history of civil rights. It seems appropriate that he was born on the 4th of July. A day, of course, that symbolizes freedom for all Americans. Because Judge Keith dedicated his life to making the dream of freedom a reality for all Americans. For this, we must all be thankful. He's also a distinguished alumnus at Wayne Law, so we too are honored on this day. For me personally, Judge Keith is a hero, a man who had the courage to live his beliefs, to turn those beliefs into action, injustice into justice. I'm both honored and delighted to be part of this celebration. This brand new Center for Civil Rights is a testament to Judge Keith's tireless work to end discrimination. In a way, the center reflects the life of Judge Keith. It recognizes his role in this nation's civil rights movement, and it's literally the convergence of knowledge, wisdom, and action, like the man himself. The center symbolizes Wayne State's continuing commitment to keep this important history alive by providing educational opportunities and experiences to our students and the community, opportunities that promote Judge Keith's enduring vision of equality and justice under the law for all Americans. The center will be a local and national source for both scholarship and remembrance. It will inspire future generations to learn from our history and to create a brighter future. It will highlight Wayne Law as the leading institution for the study of civil rights and constitutional law. It will enable the school to create new standards of training lawyers who advocate for individual rights, who possess a strong social conscience and heightened sensitivity to the needs of an increasingly diverse public. Most of all, the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights embodies Wayne State's deep admiration for Judge Keith, his strength of conscience, and his dedication to advancing the Constitution's ideals of equal justice under the law. To those of us who helped make this event possible, and you'll hear from some of them today, thank you. And for the ones that Bob recognized, thank you. Your passion, your dedication, your time, your treasure recognize the importance of the ongoing commitment to social justice and recognize a great American hero who helped make it happen. This is a great occasion, a great celebration. Thank you all for sharing it with us.
I now have the pleasure to introduce the Lieutenant Governor of the State of Michigan, the Honorable Brian Calley, who will deliver remarks on behalf of Governor Rick Snyder and the people of the great state of Michigan. Lieutenant Governor Calley.
Well, what an honor it is to be here with you today to celebrate this occasion. And you think of the life work of the man, Judge Keith. It makes sense to think about that day, July 4th, only a few years earlier than when Judge Keith was born, 1776, to reflect on the words, or more importantly, the ideals that he and the others who came before him and those who came after, which he paved the way for, were fighting for all along. See, in the beginning, when a group of founders got together, they sent this letter, a letter which was a unanimous declaration by the Continental Congress. Incidentally, could you imagine any unanimous action by Congress today? But in the second sentence of this declaration, which was essentially a letter to King George III, the most powerful man in the world at the time, it said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." That's quite a statement to make to a king, because what they're saying is, no matter what you say, the things that we're about to lay out here, they're true just because they're true. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, the first and great premise that our nation was founded upon. We got the words right, the practice wrong. It takes people like Judge Keith to stand up and be vigilant year after year, decade after decade, century after century, to make sure that that happens. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. You know, it's an interesting way of putting it, because what they're again saying to the king is that these things we're laying out, by the way, we're endowed by our Creator, not by man. The inverse of that is, if man didn't give us these rights, man cannot take them away. And so what are they? That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then the most important aspect, what comes next? What is the purpose of government? This man stands as a pillar of an important branch of our government. You might ask, well, if all these rights are just inherent and they're self-evident, what on earth do we have government for? It's an interesting thing about this document. You just read on, it gives you the answer to that too. That governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. And so brave defenders, such as Judge Keith, are part of that legacy now, of those who secured these rights, that derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And we know that if we are to derive our just powers from the consent of the governed, it means more than elections, it also means transparency. And in some of our nation's darkest hours, it took the courage and the bravery of people like Judge Damrow to make sure that the principle of the consent of the governed and daylight shined into every aspect and corner of what happened on the national stage in such difficult times. And so the legacy he leaves behind is one that inspires generations, not just within the legal community, but all of us who serve the public today. And so I will say congratulations to Wayne State, congratulations to those who look to him as an example, for all of us who look to him as an example. But most of all, congratulations for the life work of Judge Keith.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Calley. While we renew and transform this campus and raise the bar, we also celebrate our place here in Midtown in the heart of the city of Detroit. And who better to lead our efforts in the revitalization of this great city than Mayor Dave Bing, who will speak about what this new center means to the people of Detroit. Mayor Bing.
Good morning to all, and let me say it is indeed an honor and pleasure to have this opportunity. It didn't occur to me 45 years ago when I was first introduced to Judge Keith by a good personal friend, Ed Bell. And as I look back in retrospect, I didn't know what Judge Keith at that time meant to civil rights. I learned over a period of time that I had met an icon. And I just want to say to DK, as those of us who are close to him like to refer to him, he's been a beacon of hope and pride for so many of us, not only here in the city of Detroit and around the state, but across the country. I don't come to you this morning with prepared remarks because only a week ago or so we got a new communications director, and at this point in time he's a little busy doing a few other things, so I'm not here speaking from prepared remarks, but I want to speak from my heart because Damon Keith has meant so much to so many of us. The fight that he led and the fight that he leads, the legacy that this place is all about, is something that would be remembered for a long, long time. But the most important legacy that I think he leaves is not just the brick and mortar on this campus, but as I look out into the audience and I see so many faces, so many friends, so many people who have just an undying respect for this man called Damon Keith. And when we walked out here, I've never seen the kind of love that was exhibited and that was in this room. And that's what he's all about. He's been a leader, he's been a fighter, and we in this city have been extremely fortunate and lucky to live at a time when we had somebody like him walking with us. As I look at this campus and where it's located and in what it means to our city and its revival, what we're doing today is a fitting ceremony for the revival of our city and what this man really stands for. I want to thank Judge Keith for allowing people like me to have an understanding and respect for what the fight was all about. This fight is not over, and as long as he's here, we need to remind ourselves of the things that he had to endure for all of us. I just want to say thank you so much, Damon. I respect you, and like everybody in this room, I love you for what you've done.
Thank you, Mayor Bing. Our next speaker is no stranger to this university or to our law school. In fact, this speaker is the epitome of what Wayne State is all about. I am honored to introduce a great friend and supporter of the law school, chair of the Wayne State University Foundation, and member of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, Eugene Dreiker.
On behalf of the Wayne State University Foundation, I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the grand opening of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights, which honors the rich and remarkable life of one of Wayne's own sons, Judge Damon Keith. For this unique and important center to be located here marks another leap forward for Wayne State University Law School and further confirms the special nature of this place. We are honored to link Judge Keith's name with ours in such a meaningful way. The addition of this beautiful facility to our university campus is particularly fitting, for there is no more basic and important civil right than the right to a decent education, from preschool to professional school. Our courts have called education the bedrock of equal opportunity and the very foundation of good citizenship. And the Supreme Court has observed that law schools in particular are the training ground for many of our nation's leaders. A decent education depends first and foremost upon dedicated and talented teachers, but it also requires adequate facilities for them and their students. Providing the necessary places for teaching our 32,000 students is a daunting challenge, especially in these very difficult economic times. Given the financial challenges Wayne State University has faced in recent years, we are particularly in need of and especially grateful for private philanthropy from alumni and friends. You'll soon hear from one of those generous friends, A. Alfred Taubman. His leadership giving and that of Etzel and Cynthia Ford not only contributed significantly to the completion of this wonderful structure, but inspired many others to join with them in this landmark project. While Wayne State University is nominally the beneficiary of the philanthropy that made this possible, the real beneficiaries will be the generations of students whose educations will be enhanced by their learning experiences here. In just a few years, this university will celebrate its 150th anniversary. At no time in our long and rich history has Wayne State been viewed by so many as holding such an important role for the future of our city and state. That realization has greatly increased the number of contributors to the university, and their generosity will have a profound effect on our ability to carry out our mission. Winston Churchill once said that we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. We are all so very fortunate that believers in Churchill's words are also believers in this great educational institution. Wayne State University, the city of Detroit, and the entire state of Michigan will be so much the better because public-spirited citizens have combined their affection and admiration for Judge Keith with their remarkable philanthropy to bring us to this day. To all of those who have contributed so generously in honoring our dear friend Damon Keith, I extend the university's deepest thanks.
Thank you, Governor Dreiker. The Keith Center is more than a building. It is a program. Directing that program, harnessing the energy of students, faculty, and others in our community to achieve our vision is the director of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights, Professor Peter Hammer.
Say good morning. It's an incredible privilege to direct a center named in honor of Damon J. Keith, and one can only be humbled to take on such a responsibility. Keeps me up at night sometimes, Judge, because we have giant shoes to fill and a wonderful legacy to try to do justice to. I'm going to speak briefly, or maybe not so briefly if I'm a law professor, addressing three interrelated questions. What's the vision of the new Keith Center? What's a diagnosis of the pathologies underlying persistent forms of racial injustice? And what programming and future actions can the Keith Center take to address those needs? So what's the vision of the Keith Center? In simplest terms, the mission of the Keith Center is to build a center for civil rights that lives up to the life and legacy of Judge Keith. That may sound simple, but as you heard from these testimonies today, that is quite an undertaking and quite an ambitious goal. What adjectives would you have to associate with that? Well, the center has to be bold, as Judge Keith is bold. It has to be courageous. Its mission has to be broad, and we have to be ambitious. How will this be done? Well, we might think globally, think nationally, but we have to act locally. The goal is to forge a national, and I would say indeed international reputation as a leader for civil rights by focusing first and foremost on the social needs of Detroit from a rights-based perspective, as Judge Keith has spent his whole life working in Detroit. To do that, we have to have a correct understanding and diagnosis of persistent racial inequality. While we've made great progress, progress still needs to be continued. Understanding the root causes of this problem is necessary to plan for future action. So one can ask, what lessons can be gleaned by examining the civil rights movement over the past 75 years? Well, one lesson, and again it's hard for a law school and a law professor to admit it, legal changes, including the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the litigation producing Brown versus Board of Education, while all critical and all necessary, are not sufficient conditions to cultivate social justice. Much more work needs to be done. Racial inequality has deep structural roots manifested in the interrelated social pathologies of racism, of violence, and of poverty. As a result, the actions of a new civil rights center must be guided by appropriate understandings of structural racism as typified by the writings of people like Professor John Powell and his colleagues at the Kirwan Institute. And indeed, we're making progress. If you recall, Professor Powell was the very first distinguished Keith visiting professor at the law school in 2009. So law is not enough. More is necessary. A related lesson is we need a greater openness to positive rights as well as negative rights. We must not only be free from various forms of discrimination, and that struggle will always continue. We must also have a right to be free to. A right to be free to have a quality education. A right to be free to live in a safe and secure environment. A right to be free to have access to opportunity. A right to be free to have reasons for hope in the future. That's got to be part of our agenda. Another lesson, and this comes from the heart of the civil rights movement, is that civil rights actions must always be based out of a deep moral center, right? And can you hear that? I hear it. You know what I hear? I still hear the voice of Harry Belafonte ringing in this auditorium, who was here in September as the Keith Biennial Lecture, speaking to that deep moral compass, providing the leadership that needs to be directing us. And that's going to be a ringing sound in this auditorium and throughout the law school for years to come. The last lesson, and now you're in class, this is what all law students have to put up with. The last lesson in the retrospective is that we need creative problem-solving skills. It's important that lawyers of today take the lessons, or the right lessons, from the examples of Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall. The lesson is not to reify the particular tools and tactics that they used, but to learn the strategic problem-solving skills that they employed to create a template for social change. The question I tell my students to ask themselves is, what would a young Damon J. Keith do today to address these issues? Right? And we have some good templates. I would say some of the best creative problem solving in this area is done by the Advancement Project. And who directs the Advancement Project? Constance Rice, a former Keith clerk and a member of this audience tonight. So what does that mean in practice? What is our current programming and what will be our future actions? The new building is a real jewel, and I hope that everybody has a chance to give one of the open tours that will be available. But I encourage you to start thinking about the new facility as just the tip of a civil rights iceberg. The real grandeur is just suggestive of the action and the power that lay even deeper. The facilities will support the work of the Damon J. Keith Collection of African American Legal History, directed by India Geronimo, also a former Keith clerk here in the audience. And it typifies Judge Keith's admonishments that only by knowing and respecting our history can we hope to chart our future. So the Keith Collection will be one of the engines driving us forward. The Keith Center and Wayne Law are already busy training the next generation of civil rights leaders and activists. We have to continue to grow the expert faculty, to expand the race of civil rights offerings, and to train the future leaders who will be picking up the mantle of people like Judge Keith. The Keith Center supports a brand new student group, the Keith Students for Civil Rights, with over 70 members, active law students at the school who engage in independent programming that the center supports. They do Know Your Rights training around issues of immigration and around issues of employment. They will be convening this weekend a Youth Civil Rights Summit, which will be inviting over 100 area law or high school students to start dialogues about the meaning of civil rights, but also about what civil rights mean to the young, as we can start to connect much better in our broader effort to make education a civil right. The Keith Center supports the work of Associate Director and Professor Jocelyn Benson in her new Michigan Allies project called MAP, MAP identifies, educates, and coordinates actions in response to hate crimes and incidents of intolerance. The Keith Center will be a convening space for thought and action, bringing together other groups in the community, forging new partnerships to address ongoing civil rights concerns. The Keith Center will support academic research, writing, and advocacy in partnership with the Journal of Law and Society to address Detroit's pressing social issues from a rights-based perspective. For example, in the past 2 years, the Journal, in partnership with the Keith Center, has held symposium addressing resizing the city of Detroit, addressing deconstructing the school-to-prison pipeline, and in the spring, we will hold a symposium looking at issues of governance, anything ranging from privatization of utilities in the Detroit area to the employment of emergency managers throughout the state. These are exciting times, but we also, I think, live in troubled times. When people sometimes ask me, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full, sometimes I simply answer yes. And the Keith Center must be part of that struggle to tip the balance in the right direction. The judge's mantra is equal justice under law. This mantra must be given real meaning in the many disparate struggles for civil rights that continue. Some battles are old and perennial. Religious intolerance continues to be a problem, which demands constant vigilance. Attacks on the Jewish community are some of the leading categories of hate crimes. This struggle is not over. In Southeast Michigan, we must be attentive to the needs of the Arab American community. Magic happens when you stand within 3 feet of Judge Keith. At the groundbreaking in the lobby of McGregor, he introduced me to one of his clerks, many of his clerks, which are here, but Irfan Martuza, and said, work with this man to address post-9/11 civil rights. And under the leadership of Irfan, we will be hosting our inaugural post-9/11 civil rights lecture with Professor David Cole from Georgetown University on November 15th of next month. That struggle continues. We must also be attentive to the needs of immigrant communities. We all have different life stories. The immigrant community hits particularly close to home for me. My partner is Cambodian. He came to this country as a refugee after surviving the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge, and there's a federal clerkship hook to this story as well. We met in Los Angeles when I was clerking in an appellate court in a renegade circuit out west. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary earlier this month. 6 months before we met, he had finally gotten, after spending 10 years in the Thai refugee camps, his 5 sisters, their husbands, and their families together, all of whom now live in Michigan with us. There's no small gatherings at our house. But it's let me see firsthand the struggle of what it means to come to America and the struggle over 20 years of what it means to try to become an American in this complex narrative that we're still living out. Finally, the needs of the LGBT community must be part of our agenda. One of my first official acts upon assuming the directorship of the Keith Center was the privilege to testify before a House subcommittee in Lansing addressing extending Elliot Larson civil rights protection to include protections against discrimination based upon the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Unfortunately, those changes were not adopted, and that struggle still continues. What do we learn from these many different struggles? Well, one thing is that different groups have to come together under a common banner. Where do we find motivation for such a struggle? The answer lies in part in the life and wonderful legacy of Judge Damon Day Keith. Where will we find a basis for action in such a struggle? The answer lies in part in the new Keith Center for Civil Rights and a dedication to building a program that is bold, that is ambitious, that is courageous, and that lives up to the life and legacy of Damon Keith. This new facility is a real jewel, and we honor and respect those that have made this possible. It is a tremendous gift to the law school, it is a tremendous gift to Wayne State University, it's a tremendous gift to the city of Detroit and the entire state of Michigan. But more than anything else, it's a fitting tribute to a wonderful man, Judge Damon J. Keith.
Thank you, Professor Hammer. I think you all can see why we're enthused not only about the building, but about the program that it will house. The Keith Center has been graciously supported by a number of donations from prominent foundations and philanthropists in Metro Detroit and beyond. One of these most important partners and friends is with us today to honor a friendship with Judge Keith that has gone back many years. I am very honored to introduce A. Alfred Taubman, who, among other things, is author of the book Threshold Resistance, a reflective story of his life and of retail architecture. And I certainly hope we've overcome threshold resistance in the construction and design of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. Mr. Taubman.
Thank you very much. I have had the honor to be a friend of Judge Keith's for more than 30 years. He's a towering figure in the world of law and justice, and one of the warmest men I've ever known. It's important that future generations of Detroiters and all over the world remember his name and understand the enormous contributions he's made to democracy and human justice. The Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights is a fitting tribute to one of our city's favorite sons. It is an honor this project bestows on Judge Keith that makes the day so special for me. Today, the Keith Center opens its doors with great expectations and powerful dreams befitting the giant whose name it bears. Congratulations, Damon, and thanks to Wayne State community for adding this unique resource to your campus. By celebrating the life and work of Judge Damon Keith, this building and its programs will be a beacon of learning and hope for generations to come. May it fulfill our expectations and sustain the dream made possible by the extraordinary life of Damon Keith. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taubman. Now I would like to take a few moments to tell you about our very special guest. As a member of the federal judiciary, he has consistently stood as a courageous defender of the constitutional rights and civil rights of all people. Motivated by his experiences with discrimination in the United States Army and inspired by his studies at Howard University Law School under Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall, whose image is visible as soon as you enter the Damon J. Keith Center, Judge Damon Keith learned early on that law was not merely an academic exercise to be discussed in law journals and classrooms, but an active and changing body that affected real, everyday people. As a young lawyer, Damon Keith often saw the disadvantage that black lawyers and their clients faced when they entered the courtroom. He quickly realized that the only way to level the playing field would to become a judge and to set a new standard for the equal treatment of black and white lawyers alike. He thus began his groundbreaking career as a judge, duly earning his reputation as a courageous defender of the civil rights of all people. In 1967, Damon Keith was appointed to the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, and he became the chief judge in 1975. In 1977, he was appointed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. In United States v. Sinclair, commonly referred to as the Keith decision, the Supreme Court unanimously affirmed Judge Keith's landmark ruling prohibiting President Nixon and the federal government from engaging in warrantless wiretapping in violation of the Fourth Amendment. More recently, in Detroit Free Press v. Ashcroft, Judge Keith memorably declared, "Democracies die behind closed doors," and ruled it unlawful for the Bush administration to conduct deportation hearings in secret whenever the government asserted that the people involved might be linked to terrorism. What a career, what a life, born on the 4th of July, crusading for justice and civil rights for all people. It is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Judge Damon J. Keith.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dean Ackerman. I really feel as though I'm walking in high cotton today. And if my lovely wife Rachel were here, I would say, darling, you know, I came home today to tell you that they just named me the Man of the Year. And she would say, Damon, that shows you what type of year it's been. But I am thrilled about the building that bears my name, and am humbled by all of the wonderful things that have been said today. I want to thank Dean Ackerman, Governor Tina Abbott, my longtime friend President Allen Gilmore, Lieutenant Governor Brian Kelly, and Governor Browning. You're quite a speaker, you know. I was pleased there. And of course, Dave Bing, Gene Dreicher, Professor Hammer, who is the director of the Keith Center, and India here, who is the director of the Damon J. Keith Law Collection of African American History. I saw Willie Horton here, and he's here someplace. They named a day after him. It was yesterday. It's his birthday, October the 18th. And then I thought I saw Dennis Archer come in too. I may have missed it. I want to thank the architects and contractor, Jim Chavis and Dave Lattimore, Mr. Rosselli. And if you'll bear with me, I would just like to introduce my three daughters and granddaughters, Cecile, Justin, Debbie, and Gilda, and my granddaughter, Emil. I have a number of nieces and nephews here. They may be filling half this room, so I won't get into that. I want to thank the portrait artist, Nancy Mitter. Edsel Ford, his lovely wife, Charlotte, picked out the portrait and frame. If you come in my office, I have pictures of Edsel's father, Henry, at least 5 of them. But the one that stands out most in my mind is the one that was taken with the founder of the United Negro College Fund, the president of Tuskegee University. Henry Ford was deeply, deeply committed to the struggle of education, especially for blacks. And we had this picture taken of the founder of the United Negro College Fund and with Henry Ford, and it sits prominently in my office. Edsel, I want to thank you personally for your friendship and for that beautiful portrait that you have in the Damon J. Keith Center. It is absolutely gorgeous, and they tell me you even selected the frame. So, Charlotte, I want to thank you. Edsel is deeply committed to this city of Detroit and to the struggle of freedom, and he's following in his father's footsteps and not letting Detroit go down the drain. He is committed totally, unequivocally, to doing the best he can to revive this city, Dave, and it's on the way up, and I can tell you I'm proud of it. And thank you, Edsel, for all of your help and support, and especially when you go see this new building over there. As you walk in, you will see this large portrait that Etzel and Charlotte and his father had put there in this beautiful frame. And I'm humbled by your selection, Etzel, and I'm thrilled that you thought that I'm worthy of this type of recognition. I deeply appreciate it. I'd like to thank Emery Stevens and the event planners, Jeff Block and Pam Williams, and all the volunteers that worked to make this event possible. Al Taubman and I go back a long time, and he's probably going to get angry with me if I go tell him how far we go back. But I was saying this morning at the ribbon cutting that when I was chairman of the bicentennial many years ago, Chief Justice Warren E. Burger was the principal speaker. And we had about 2,000 people there and 4 governors. And I was on the board of Interlochen, and I said, Al, I would like very much to bring the Interlochen band down to Detroit to play the Star Spangled Banner, Stars and Stripes Forever, and let Chief Justice Burger direct them. And Al said, well, Damon, just go up, call Interlochen, tell them to bring the entire band down, and they'll play, put them up at the Renaissance, and I'll pick up the bill. Now, that's just one of the furnace. Then, and then a few years ago, when Rosa Parks was beaten up, and you remember this, I was just frustrated, but I didn't want her to go back into that neighborhood because someone had broken in her house, as you recall, and beaten her up, and this man was convicted. And I said, we've got to get you a decent place to live, Mother Parks. So I called Al Taubman in New York. I said, Al, this has happened to Rosa Parks, and I don't want her to go back into that neighborhood. He says, well, Damon, have her go down to the Riverfront Apartments. I'll call there. We'll furnish the place for her, see that she's protected. I, like you, I don't want her to go back into that neighborhood. So Rosa Parks stayed there until her death. And then, at that time, Mrs. Parks became very sick, and they were naming a museum in her honor in Montgomery, Alabama. And she wasn't able to fly commercially because she just couldn't. So I called again, called Al Taubman. I said, Al, Rosa Parks is here. Is that John Conyers I see out there? John, raise your hand. Okay, I didn't want to miss you, John. Okay. So I said, Al, Rosa Parks wants to be in Montgomery, Alabama tomorrow, or day after tomorrow. They're naming the museum in her honor, but she cannot fly physically on a commercial plane. Can you help? He says, Damon, have her to meet my pilots at my airport. Tomorrow morning, and I'll see that she is taken there, and he did that. But getting to this building, it would not be the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights And I know Al's going to get mad at it, but I take a little bark off of Al every now and then. I'm the only one who can do that. Like, everybody else is scared of him. So we were at the Detroit Club many years ago having lunch that I paid for. And Al said, Damon, you've got the Damon J. Keith Law Collection of African American History at Wayne, but you have been so involved in the civil rights struggle. Do you think we could name a building at Wayne for you? I said, well, Al, I don't know. He says, well, and this is where he and I disagree sometimes. He says, well, I'll put up the lead gift of $3 million. You think that would help? I said, Al, I think it would help a lot. So we went through the process of everything, and it was through that day at the Detroit Club that Al Taubman suggested the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights, and he backed it up with $3 million. Now, when Dean Ackerman and I had lunch out to his beautiful building about 6 months ago, he says, Damon, I thought I told you I was going to give you $4 million. I said, Al, are you worried about 3 or 4? He said, but Dean Ackerman was there. So, Al, I know we got the 3. I'm still waiting for the other $1 million. On a personal, I want to thank my staff, Dot Vinson, Sujay Rayo, my law clerks, Jerome Price, Savella Nolan, and I want to thank all of you for all that you have done to help me. The remarks that the Attorney General was attempting to make indicated that 3 of my former law clerks have been selected by President Barack Obama to be a part of his administration. In D.C., the United States Attorney there is Ron Meacham. Is Ron here? I don't know, but Ron is the United States Attorney. And the envoy to OIC, Rashad Hussain, and Rashad Hussain has flown all over the world, and he flew in all the way from London, England, to be with us for this event today. And Rashad, if you're here, I wish you would stay. And Spencer Overton was my law clerk, and he was the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department, the Office of Legal Policy. Spencer Overton, if you're here, will you stand? Now, it's pretty good when the President of the United States selects 3 of your former law clerks to be a part of his administration, but I have been very fortunate in terms of my law clerks. I tell them all the time, David Simmons, that they're going to make me famous because they're so famous. And I want to thank all of you for your kindness, your love. I see my colleague, Judge Eric L. Clay, a former law clerk of mine, who now sits on the Court of Appeals with me for the Sixth Circuit. Eric, will you stand, please? I thought I saw Judge Averin Cohen here. Is Averin here? Well, I know I saw him just a little while ago. I don't know where he may be now, but Averin, I thank you and all federal other judges who have come here. It's been a high honor and one that I deeply appreciated. I want to thank all of you for making this day possible. I've been walking on floors that I did not scrub, and I've been going through doors that I did not open. I hope this Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights will continue to allow, through its legacy, people to continue to scrub floors hypothetically so that others can walk on them and open doors that they can walk through. Because it's important, and I've tried to live my life this way, to give everybody an opportunity to exercise and do everything they can with their God-given talent. And that should be our goal as judges, as lawyers, and as human beings. It's my pleasure now to introduce Mitch Albom. Now, one of the tests that I use in terms of friendship is whether or not that is a good person I'm dealing with. If he or she is a good human being. Now, Mitch has written all of these bestsellers. He's directed the plays, and he's on radio, and he's on TV. But he's a good human being. He's a good man. You saw the column a few weeks ago where he was walking down a street on the east side, and the man recognized him, and he says, "I recognize you." He said, "I haven't eaten," and this and that. And Mitch took money out of his pocket, gave him that. He just flew back from Haiti, where he has established a school over there, philanthropic place to help the less fortunate. He's doing it here in the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, in addition to being just an absolute genius in terms of his writing and how he can do it so quickly and so accurately. And so I'm proud. I would like to say this, I hope you don't mind it, Mitch, that he's been working with Trevor Coleman on my biography. He's been editing it, and he has just been doing a tremendous job in doing it. And I want to thank you, Mitch, for all that you have done and continue to do. But more than that, I want to thank you, dear friend, for being a good man, a good human being. Ladies and gentlemen, Mitch Albom.
Thank you so much. Judge, esteemed guests, honored friends and family, I am totally unworthy of being the final speaker at this type of a ceremony. Usually with your last name begins with A, they stick you at the top. I don't know what happened. There's a story about a country preacher who decides one Sunday that he's going to put the fear of God into his parish, his congregation. So he writes up a sermon, and he comes out that Sunday morning, and he begins by saying, "Just remember, everybody in this parish is going to die one day." And he notices this one guy in the front is kind of smiling. And he says, what are you so happy about? And the guy says, "I'm not from this parish. I'm just visiting my sister." Well, that's a little bit how I feel here today. Kind of fish out of water. This is definitely the closest I will ever get to law school. I don't know much about the law. I am not an organized person. I'm kind of scatterbrained. But I do know people. And I know good people. And I know great people when I meet them. And this man is one of them. and he does his name proud. In Greek mythology, Damon is a loyal friend to Pythias, and when Pythias is sentenced to die, he's given time to get his affairs in order and say goodbye to his family, but only because Damon vows to sit in prison holding his friend's place. And if Pythias doesn't return, Damon will have to give his life instead. That's a big dice roll, friend or no friend. And you might be checking your watch pretty often in that scenario. But Damon waited. He remained true. And in the end, just in time, Pythias did return, just as Damon always knew he would. The king was so impressed by their friendship and their loyalty that he spared them both. Well, Judge Damon Keith is not quite as old as that Greek Damon, but still they do share certain traits, most notably that fierce dedication to what they believe is right, no matter how many voices might whisper, it will never come. The mythological Damon waited on his friend. The real-life Damon waited on the world to get right. He endured a segregated society, racial slurs, the cruelty of lowered expectations. He wasn't allowed to be part of certain high school teams, attend school dances, or join certain clubs because of the color of his skin. He had to change trains to sit in the colored compartment while on his way to college down south, to college. He mopped floors in the Detroit news bathrooms while studying for the bar exam, and had to listen to a white newspaper man ask him once what he was doing with such a heavy book, as if knowledge should not be lifted by a working man, let alone a working black man. When Damon told him he was studying for the bar, the man walked away laughing and said, "A black lawyer? Keep mopping." That may not speak well for my profession of journalism or for the Detroit news bathrooms. But it does speak volumes for Judge Keith. He endured, he persevered. He would not let the words "born into" be equated with "dies unchanged." His accomplishments would take all day to list here, but suffice it to say, when people needed a champion, he was there. When principle needed a champion, he was there. When the rights of free society clashed with the power lust of certain politicians, he was there. And when Detroit needed calm and reason after the turmoil of the late 60s, Judge Keith and his wife opened up their home on Thanksgivings for a virtual turkey summit of leaders, black and white. He built coalitions. He made the best peace. I once asked a wise old man to tell me what were the most important possessions in life. And he said to study an infant when it comes into the world. He said, did you ever notice how when babies come into the world, their little fists are clenched like this? Yes, I said. That's because babies, he said, coming into the world don't know any better, and they think they're going to take everything. But look at me, he said. I'm an old man now, and I'm going to die soon. And how am I going to die? And he opened his palms. That's because, he said, when you reach the end, you realize you take nothing with you. He was right. The measure of the man is not what he snags in those closed fists, but what he leaves behind with an open palm. The building that we celebrate today comes not from the tight grip of a selfish law expert, but from the open hand of a judge who built his legacy one decision at a time, one principle at a time, one clear, brave, sometimes controversial, but always well thought ruling at a time. He never let ego rule him, nor anger, not even when shortly after being appointed by the president to the Bicentennial Commission on the Constitution, he was mistaken for a hotel porter, called boy, and told to go park a car. He could have let rage rule him. He did not. He made the best peace. Have you ever been inside Judge Keith's office? The walls there are like a memorabilia shop of the 20th century. You could take all the famous delis in New York City and still not have as many photos on the wall as he has on his. The last time I was in there, I actually thought about sneaking my photo up there because I was the only person on earth not to be on a hook. But those people are there for a reason. They're proud to know this man. They're proud to be his friend. Judge Keith has and has had many friends. He has wonderful children and grandchildren. He had the greatest blessing you could ask for in life, a loving wife whom he adored from the moment he met her in a lab at Detroit Receiving Hospital. He was not going in for a procedure, but he might as well have had a transplant. Because from that moment he laid eyes on Rachel Boone, he was sharing his heart with another soul. It's worth noting that Judge and Rachel's first date was a Lions game, at which Damon refused to cheer for the Lions because they didn't have any black players. I believe for the next 50 years there were other reasons not to cheer for the Lions, most of them having to do with the score. But you live long enough and look where we are. Damon Keith, once told a black man could never be a lawyer, now has a civil rights center named after him, and the Lions are 5-1. I don't know which is more stunning progress. But I do know this. The Greek Damon was loyal to something special, friendship. Our Damon has been equally loyal to something special, human rights, civil rights, justice. He defined these things, he stood up for them, he ruled on them, and ultimately helped shape them. And now they take on his shape in the form of a beautiful, gleaming, illustrious building that bears his name. There's an old proverb in which a dying man asks an angel to show him heaven and hell. First, the angel takes him down. He shows him a long banquet table, and it's filled with the finest meats and cheeses and desserts, all the most amazing food in the world. But all the people sitting at this endless table have their arms locked out in front of them, unable to move or to ever partake of the bounty on the table. This is tragic, the man tells the angel. Please, get me out of here. Show me heaven. The angel takes him up to another place. It looks remarkably like the first one. There's an endless banquet table filled with the most exquisite food you could imagine. And all around the table are people sitting with their arms locked out in front of them. The only difference is, in heaven, they're feeding the person across from them. You inherit the world you were born into, and you can do nothing, or you can give and feed and nourish those around you. And you will find that they'll do the same for you. Damon Keith was born into a country that treated his grandparents as slaves, but he will not die in a country like that. He has helped shape it, helped change it, reached across the table, and fed the legacy of our society. He has lived up to his Greek namesake, trusting in what he knew to be true, waiting for what he knew had to come, because it was too strong a feeling not to be real. Pythias returned to prove that Damon was not wrong to trust in the best part of us. And we come here today to prove that this Damon was not wrong to trust in the best part of himself, the part that saw justice, humanity, and equal rights as the friends of mankind which will spring us from our own cells, like Pythias, just in time to save us. Judge, you honor us with your work. You bless me with your friendship. Congratulations on an honor that took a lifetime to achieve, but will last many, many more. God bless you, Judge, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitch Albom, not only for your inspiring remarks, but for all the many things you've done for our community. Judge Keith has asked me to remark. Dale Brown, the judge's son-in-law, has just joined us. And thank you, Judge Keith, for your remarks. We're all honored to have been able to walk in high cotton with you, to work with you on this project, to bring it to fruition. And thank you also for opening doors for all of us. And now I'd like to ask everyone to stand and join Emery Stevens in our closing song, "We Shall Overcome."
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Thank you, Professor Stevens. This ends the grand opening ceremony. A public reception and tours of the new center will begin at 12 noon in the lobby of the law school. As you enter the law school, you'll find food on your right and the tours on your left. Please partake of both. Democracies die behind closed doors, we are told by Judge Keith. So let's throw open the doors of the Keith Center and let the good work continue. Thank you for joining us today.